Welcome back to Scuba Diver Live. We're here again, the team. Another live stream direct into your home. Hopefully it will inspire and educate you in your diving, as well as give you a little bit of fun and laughter. Remember, if you like what we're doing, hit that subscribe button, ring that little bell, and then you'll never miss out on any of our future installments, because we've got some really cool stuff coming up over the next few weeks. Remember to leave us any comments. Let us know who you'd maybe like to see, any topics discussed, and we'll do our best to oblige. Before I introduce the guests this week, I'd just like to mention our sponsors, MeFlex Hoses. These flexible hoses are nice and colourful, really durable, add a bit of colour to your kit. So if you want to stand out from the crowd, check out their web shop. They are open now, even during lockdown. Right, on with today's show. And it's all got an underwater photography theme this time on the virtual sofa. And we've got two leading lights of the underwater photography world joining us. We've got Phil Medcalf and Paul Duxfield. I'd like to welcome them on board.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, all right.
Good. Surviving lockdown.
Yeah, not too
Just
bad.
about.
Yeah.
I'm about ready to get back into diving, though. I think the gills are drying out a little bit too much.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll get there. We'll get there. Right. So to start off for everyone, I'm sure that lots of people who are watching might know you already. You're obviously familiar faces from within the pages of Scuba Diver magazine anyway. But how did you actually get into diving in the first place? Because everyone likes to know how everyone got started.
Well, for me, total fluke. Total accident, early 90s. I met a guy who was an underwater videographer. He did stuff for the BBC, and I ended up being his buddy. I never started diving as a hobby, really. It was always to do something else, because I had some experience in underwater. I had some experience in videos and photography and stuff like that. I helped him edit a short movie, so that was how I got started, early 90s, and then did some stuff for Granada TV, and that sort of followed on from there. And that was how it all started, with sort of taking pictures and video underwater.
I'm quite different to Duxy, because I started in the sort of hobby way. I was, from being a tiny child, obsessed with the sea and marine life and wanted to learn to dive. And when I went to Polytechnic, it was before polytechnics became universities. I went to Sunderland Polytechnic and joined their sub-aqua club, BSAT club, and learnt there as a sort of hobby thing. And I kind of, on occasions, hoped I'd get into diving as a business, but it's been a long time coming, really.
So that's funny, actually. So one of you actually started it off as more of a hobby, and underwater photography wasn't really even on the horizon at that point. Whereas Duxy, there, you actually were into the video side and photography even really before you got into the diving.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was that was the thing. The diving side of things was way down on the list of priorities, and it took me a while. And I wasn't a natural first time. I mean, some people are sort of born in the water, as it were. I wasn't. It took me quite a while. It took me a good sort of 100 or so dives. But luckily, my mate, who was this underwater cameraman, he's endless patience, and he was a long-term sort of old school charmer. So he took me under his wing, and he mentored me, and then I started to move into the professional side of diving, did all my courses, dive master and stuff like that, and ended up living out in Sharman, working as a guide.
So you said that you were already doing land photographs and some video stuff on land anyway before you went underwater?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd worked as I'd worked in like local press. I did some stuff for magazines. I did some stuff for skateboarding. Believe it or not, I'm a skateboarder, and not a very good one. So I ended up taking photographs of my friends who were doing it and supplying stuff to magazines, worked for local press. But most of the time I was working in specialist photography retail, really, and that sort of came full circle with the way the diving went, and I sort of took this hiatus of diving, total different direction in my life. Went and lived in a foreign country for a while, which I totally recommend anybody to do. Yeah, it sort of various things fell into place. I said yes at the right times. I'm a very lucky person, I know that, and I grabbed those opportunities and ran with them. So yeah, that was sort of how it all sort of panned out and started.
Yeah, so it tied you in with that. That's nice. So that's got you done. So Phil, you were obviously doing it more from the hobby side of things, as you said.
Yeah.
But then, what were you already a land photographer in the hobby side of things, or did you just start really getting into photography from the underwater side of it?
Yeah, I didn't. I always we always had cameras in our household, but we never really had. It was never a serious amateur photographer or anything. I took snaps. I had like an automatic cameras, and then I started. When I started diving, and I think the first time I took pictures underwater was the first time I went to Egypt in like 1994, and I used a disposable Fuji made disposable 35mm waterproof cameras that you could actually take them quite deep. They were supposed to be for 10 meters, but they carried on working. But obviously, there's no light down there. And then it was kind of I got a sort of very cheap compact camera, film camera in a housing after that, and then but it was the digital side that got me sort of more into underwater photography. Me and my wife Anne, we went to Egypt on honeymoon, and that was the first sort of diving trip she did. She learnt in the UK, and then we went on honeymoon, and we got a digital compact camera and took pictures with that, and we just ended up we took a load of pictures, but we didn't understand how to get a decent picture. So when we looked at all these pictures, we were like, I can't understand why our pictures aren't as good as the ones in, even in the reviews for that particular camera, there were much better pictures. And we were like, how can they be getting better pictures? And we were a bit poor for a couple of years after getting married. And then we went on another trip. And before we did that trip, Anne did a search on the internet and found some articles by a guy called Paul Duxy Duxfield, who recommended you used custom white balance. And we did this trip and did what this guy told us. Who knows why we took this bloke's word for it.
Yeah.
And the pictures improved. And a year or two later, I persuaded Anne to do a liverboard, which she wasn't keen on. She wasn't keen on boats, but then it was the first time she saw a turtle, and then she loved it. And we did a liverboard, and we wanted to do another one, and we saw one advertised, and this photography one, and this guy called Paul Duxy Duxfield was running it, and we went on that, and we became fast friends, I think, and over the years, we got more and more into it and did more and more workshops, and ended up we went into business with him, and from that, the business blew up, which was the company we had before. Eventually, there was difficulties in running a business when one of us was doing a lot of traveling, and we live like on the either side of the north of England. And we set up Duxy went into more doing workshops, and we started, the company basically became Alphamarine Photography, where we do some workshops, but we do retail. And that's kind of how we got into photography. But yeah, I had no real understanding of photography. I had to learn it for underwater, and you really have to. That's the interesting thing. Underwater is, the conditions really don't suit just pointing and shooting a camera.
I was just going to say that with me. I mean, I wasn't a massive photo enthusiast. I wouldn't describe myself as, but I could take a photograph, because when I worked on newspapers, small local newspapers, you end up doing everything. So you're the reporter, the editor, photographer, and everything. So I could take a reasonable shot topside. But what I found when I went underwater, and I was kind of pressed into shooting underwater photography, because it wasn't something that I did because I wanted to. It's something I did because I needed to, working for the magazine. And I found that a lot of the stuff that I knew topside doesn't actually work that well when you're underwater. Because obviously, as you said, underwater, you're shooting through the water column, it's darker, and the camera settings, I know that they're getting better now, but a lot of cameras, they don't know they're underwater. So they're trying to cope with what it thinks you're doing, and it thinks you're really dark, and this. So everything was off. So I think sometimes perhaps not having any experience of cameras before you start shooting underwater photography might actually help you out, because you're not trying to do something that won't work.
I absolutely agree with that. In fact, I think it's probably easier to teach underwater photography to somebody, underwater photography that is, and not the whole subject of photography, to somebody who doesn't have a background in photography, because sometimes you're fighting against preconceived beliefs that people have. However, I can't deny that when you do get somebody who comes along who really understands photography, it's more about teaching them how to dive to take pictures, and that is I describe underwater photography as it's like a three-way sort of holistic thing. There's the photography itself and understanding that. There's the diving skills, and something that I know Phil's really hot on, understanding the marine life, the marine biology, and what goes on there. And if you can pull all those three things together, then you're on a sort of a winner, really, because that's the trick. It's not that difficult to teach people the technicalities of underwater photography. It's pulling all of those three skills together. And I think, touching on what you said there, Mark, about magazine stuff, a lot of the time that, because I come from sort of a background like that pictures need to tell a story, I'll often take pictures with half of that in mind. Even if I'm just taking the pictures for myself, I'm taking pictures with the idea that, I need a person in a shot because it's selling the concept of photography and underwater photography in the world of diving, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Have you found out, Phil, with when you've been teaching people who've maybe done land photography, and those who've come in and it's the first time they've ever really held the camera? Yeah.
I think you get this sort of, I think sometimes the other thing is with people who've started off and done a bit, and I'm sure Duxy will agree with it, and often it can be people who've spent quite a bit of money already on equipment. And then this sort of, they don't necessarily feel that. I think sometimes people are worried that they'll look daft, that they've got all this gear and they're still not sure what to do with it. And some of it is people often sort of go, they'll ask their friends and they'll ask on, Facebook groups and things like that, and say, what's the best equipment? And if they've got the money, they can end up spending quite a lot of money and have quite a big rig. And the risk is with, I know this through experience of having done workshops with in Egypt with Duxy, where I, as somebody who had like a compact camera, would look at the guys with the big DSLR setups with everything and think, oh, they must really know what they're doing. And a lot of time they don't. And this is the thing that you sort of have to, get over to people, that, there's no such thing as a stupid question, and don't feel daft about asking and stuff like that. And yeah, I think, the guys who are less confident or have sort of spent less money on the gear tend to be the ones who are easier to do, are more likely to sort of just say, oh, how do I do this and things. So yeah, it's definitely the sort of case, and I know, you see, that's the other thing with Duxy having come in sort of in a sort of one-to-one environment where he kind of was already a photographer and things, and then learned from somebody the sort of underwater filmmaking. I think from my point of view, I kind of learned it as another punter on, a liverboard on a workshop and things like that. So I kind of look back on that and can sort of go, well, this is how, I learned, and this is what helped me. And it really sort of helps for how we kind of created workshops and things.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And that actually leads me on to the next thing, which was about, you both offer underwater photography workshops, and the land-based and liverboard and everything. So it was what are the benefits of anyone attending one of these, and then what level of photographer are they aimed at?
Oh, well, I mean, Phil sort of touched on it there. There is a misperception that underwater photography workshops are purely for people with previous experience, and actually you couldn't be further from the truth. I'm very interested in everybody really. Those that are sort of real expert in underwater photography, they come along on a trip, and they come along because of the itinerary. And the itineraries of the photo workshops are very, very different from a regular, say, liveaboard or land-based itinerary. So a lot of those people come along because they like the freedom that we give them in that type of trip. But then at the other side of the coin, you've got the absolute beginners, and I love having a good chunk of the people who are really new to it, because I mean, let's face it, those are the ones that you can probably impact and change more. But also, when you've got a boat full of people, you've got 20 odd people on a boat, everybody's learning from everybody else. You know, I'll give up underwater photography the day I stop learning something on a liveaboard. I will, every single time I learn something, whether it's the diving, whether it's the marine life, or whether it's the actual underwater photography itself. It's a very inclusive thing. And I think diving's a very inclusive thing. And as we all know, a lot of people are intimidated a lot by the kit and the equipment with diving. I think underwater photography crystallizes that. And all I'd like to say is I like to dispel that myth. These trips are for everybody, for the absolute expert who just wants an itinerary where they can go and do their own thing, to somebody who wants hand-holding with either the diving, the photography, or understanding the marine life. It all works.
Yeah, I think and we gotta agree with that. I mean, we Duxy's sort of formula for running a workshop. I think we lost count of how many workshops we sort of did, and this is how we've sort of been friends for so long and things. And it is that kind of thing. I think from a point of view of being somebody who went and did workshops, and then now we do our own workshops. I think a lot of the impression I got from different people in the sort of underwater photography community, both the people who went as customers and the people who actually run workshops, is there's quite a wide variety of what you get for your in a workshop. I mean, we run ones in the UK, which are 2-day classroom-based workshops, but there's other people who run like one-to-one in-pool training and things like that. And a lot of it is kind of like, what do you think will give you the most benefit? And I think, a lot of the time, and we were talking about this yesterday, a lot of the time with workshops that we do, especially the Red Sea Photo Camp, where there's 3 of us doing it, me, Duxy, and Dan. It's not just about being taught photography, it's about interacting with the other people who are doing photography, but it's also about the crack. It's about being with people who are interested in the same kind of thing and want to do the same kind of diving. And that's one of the big things that people come back from having done sort of photography workshops with the right setup and the right people leading them, is that they say, oh, well, the diving's really relaxed, we get all the time we want to take pictures, you can do stuff, you're not under pressure to get out at a certain time, and with liveaboards suddenly we do this dive and that dive, we move the boat, we do this, that, the schedules aren't like that, at least on the ones Duxy runs. And the same with the Red Sea Photo Camp. Because it's unlimited house reef diving, you can go in as and when you choose, and sort of the only sort of thing, we do talks at certain times, but apart from that, so you can get, I think, workshops give you a lot more than just having underwater photography knowledge thrown at you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I could agree with that, because that's the one thing I always laugh at, is when you produce a camera, when you get on a boat, you tend to get 2 responses. You either get people going, oh, that's a nice piece of kit, and asking you about it, or you get people groaning because they're thinking, oh, God, we're going to have someone dawdling along, holding up the group, because they're going to be taking pictures of a nudibranch asleep, or if you buddied with someone and they've got a camera, you can see other people go, oh, I'm buddied with a cameraman, so they're not going to be watching me, and I'm going to have to keep finding them when they'll have their head stuck in a hole and doing macro photography and stuff. So I think probably one benefit of going on a specific photo course is that as well. Like you said, you've got like-minded people, so you're not going to encounter any of that. but also because you've got the freedom to be in spots for as long as you want, or you got the extended time, it just makes it a whole lot more relaxed as an all-round experience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, sort of building on what you've just said there about being trapped on a boat with an underwater photographer. It used to be years ago in the film days, and unfortunately, I think all of us here remember the film days. There'd be one weirdo on the boat with a camera and everything else, and now there's often a bunch of weirdos on the boat. But what I've started to find with either the camp, the land-based, the Red Sea Photo Camp, or the liveaboard trips, we're starting to get people who are coming along that aren't underwater photographers. Now, this is an interesting phenomenon because they're coming along because they like going slow. They like not having to follow a guide. They like to sort of take their time. And so, I mean, I'm into it not just for photography. I like the marine life stuff as well. I like the aspect of the life on the reef and everything else. So I'm just as happy chatting with somebody who, professors that, I mean, I'll often get people who'll come to me and say, I'm not an underwater photographer. That's fine. That's absolutely great. Because they're often going to bring something else to the table, which, you might not discover until day 2 or 3, but that's the beauty of these things. It's meeting a bunch of new people and getting along and sharing something. But it's not just the photography. It's about, as Phil touched on, the most important thing is the craft, because people often come on 10, 11 different trips, workshops or whatever. They've been on many workshops with me. They're not there to hear the same old presentations and talks again. They're there because they're with a bunch of people that share the same passion, whether it's the marine life, whether it's the diving, or whether it's the photography.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. But like I said, it is nice to actually be in a position where you have got all like-minded people and hopefully avoid some of that stigma.
Yeah, dispelling the myths.
Yeah, that's it, just to show. And also, I think it's a little bit different now as well, because you have got people. I mean, all right, there are some people I think who still will spend hours and hours and hours on trying to get one particular photograph. But I always had, the few trips that I've run, which were not obviously a dedicated photography trip, but they were usually like friends that and family that I invited, and a lot of the friends that came were underwater photographers because they were professional. So there was a lot of people with cameras on. So I just had a kind of an unwritten rule that if everyone was pootling around and we found something, you had a 5-shot limit. So you could take 5 shots, then you had to move. And if you wanted to get another shot of it, you could go up to the back of the queue, just so if somebody was cruising past, they could get a shot and keep going, just so you didn't have everyone sat there watching all the time. But again, it's like the next level really with a workshop where it's really dedicated and people can have the time to do what they want then. So that's great. So moving on from that one is you obviously do the workshops and stuff in lots of different places. What are your favorite destinations for diving as an underwater photographer? So it might be more than one, but there might be specific reasons why somewhere is better than others.
Oh, you've got to be first. That was kind of it. I'd read the Red Sea. The Egyptian Red Sea is somewhere that's probably, for me, I mean, I've dived there a lot, not as much as Duxy. I mean, I've been the amateur until, until going into the photography business. So I've not been a dive guide, but I have done a lot of trips to the Red Sea and done a lot of diving in the Red Sea. And it just delivers as a place to get good pictures of, macro photography, wide angle photography. It kind of ticks the boxes. You've got the chance, depending on where you go, to see any manner of thing. I mean, there's been, humpbacks and stuff like that. And, but certainly I've seen mantas and a good range of sharks and things. And then lots and lots of macro stuff. And we, in the Red Sea photo camp stuff, we've been, we do wide angle stuff and we do macro and we do dives where you go to 5 meters and just look at tiny things. I mean, so yeah, the Red Sea kind of for a place to go to really quickly. It's tropical sea diving, coral reef, and it's 5.5 hours flight away. It's brilliant. I mean, as a place I love Indonesia. you've got somewhere like Komodo, much more expensive to go to, but you've got amazing high energy diving and macro and stuff there. And North Sulawesi, fantastic for macro. But yeah, it's not an easy one. For diving, not underwater photography, I love the Maldives. I love the currents and the very, varied viz and big stuff and walls and stuff. But it's not an easy place to take photographs. So I wouldn't say Maldives for photos, but yeah, Red Sea or Indonesia, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd sort of echo that. I mean, touching on the Indonesia thing, I'd not done. I'd run plenty of workshops. I'd lived and worked in Egypt for quite some time, and I'd never been anywhere else up until, I think it was 2007, 2008 or something, which was my first trip to Indonesia. And I felt like myself and Shelley were first diving there, I felt like I was almost being unfaithful to the Red Sea, because this place was incredible. I mean, it had a whole load of stuff that I'd never seen before. So if you'd asked me in that particular moment, I'd have said, wow, this place is incredible. It's the best, best diving I've ever done. However, I would still say, I would go back to exactly what Phil said, all considered. Indonesia's fabulous. The Philippines is awesome. Mexico, all of these places have their merits, but especially for people, living in Northern Europe, I think the Red Sea really has a hell of a lot to offer, particularly if you're at the early stages of your diving, because you can experience strong currents. If you go to the right or the wrong places in Ras Mohammed up in Tehran, but you can do some great muck diving as well if you know where to look. And there's lots of stuff available, so it's difficult to pin anything down. I will say the most gobsmacked I've been before, though, was the first time I did the cenotes in Mexico, and I did a workshop out there. And I'd been, I'd sort of been told by people what it was like and what to expect. But we did a dive called the Pit, and it was absolutely amazing. I mean, the pillars and the beams are like, for a photographer, it was amazing. Very little in the way of marine life. Well, it's not marine life; it's fresh water. But it's more about the spectacle of the place and the fact that the visibility is absolutely gin clear. So that took my breath away. But again, I'd pretty much echo Phil's sentiments there wholeheartedly and say that getting round to it, the Red Sea takes some beating. It really does.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we're very lucky as well. Like you said, it's only a 5.5 hour flight for us. I've had a few liveaboards of American friends that I brought over to Egypt like 10, 12 years ago. And for them, it's quite a distance to travel. And yet they were all absolutely blown away by it. And they couldn't get over the fact that for us, it was the equivalent of them hopping into the Caribbean. So it is very lucky that we've got Indo-Pacific that close. So I totally get what you mean. But at the moment, obviously, nobody's going anywhere. Unfortunately, because of this. So is there any hints and advice about anything that people could be doing to fill their time from an underwater photography point of view while they're stuck at home during COVID-19? Are there any new skills that could maybe develop, techniques they could try, post-production software to master, anything like that? I mean, I understand it's difficult because some things you can only really do if you're actually in the water, but is there anything that they could be doing to kind of keep the hand in before they can get wet?
Well, I would say, yeah. I mean, a lot of people are going out there suggesting stuff, and it's really great suggestions as well. Take your macro lens, go into the garden, start shooting the mini beasts out there. There's lots of really cool little jumping spiders around at the moment. I'm spending a bit of time in our garden, obviously, because of lockdown. So there's lots of stuff like that to see. In all honesty, though, I think the things that you can do to really make a difference is do a little bit of, I mean, we've all got these things, right? Exercise your creative muscle, exercise aesthetics, framing, that sort of thing. The technicalities are important, yeah? But the most important thing, at the end of the day, you can have a beautifully technical picture, but if it's poorly composed and badly framed, it's not going to work. So just getting out and about with the camera that you have in your hand all the time, on your lockdown exercise or walk, I found this thing an absolute godsend, because it keeps that freshness. It keeps me looking at the world in a sort of a way that allows me to flex that creativity. And it doesn't matter that I'm not underwater, because you can bring those skills to bear when you do get underwater. So I think, you know, just your phone is a really good thing. But an extra thing I think you could do is nothing to do with photography, is dig into some really good books on marine life. There's a really good book called What a Fish Knows, a newish book anyway. It's only been out a couple of years. Phil, in fact, he'll probably give you the name of it. There's a really good one on octopus that's doing the rounds at the moment, which is excellent. Talks about sort of the mind of an octopus. And there's a real old one that I always recommend to people. It's not a fish guide. It's called Watching Fishes. You'll have to get it on eBay because I think it's out of print. Really good book about understanding the marine life and the reef and how it works. And I think that is something that you can do on land, and you can research, and you can bring those skills and that understanding of the marine life and your creativity and aesthetics that you've done with your phone or any camera that you've got, bring that all to bear next time you're under the water.
Cool.
Yeah, I gotta agree with just get out taking photographs with your phone and things. What I sort of say to people, especially when they're starting out and they maybe haven't got that sort of muscle memory and things, is put your camera in your housing and go in the back garden and take pictures. I've had some people from who've done UK workshops who've got in touch and said, "Oh yeah, I took my compact camera in its housing out on like Exmoor and took pictures there and things like that." But yeah, you can certainly macro lenses actually work on land. If you've got macro wet lenses, you can put them on your housing port and use them on land, so you can do some macro with them. Read books. That book that Duxy mentioned, the octopus one, is called Other Minds: The Octopus and the Evolution of Intelligent Life, and it's by Peter Godfrey Smith. And I'd recommend it. He's a philosopher. He's not his background isn't exactly marine biology and things, but to give you an understanding of how amazing octopus are, it's one to read. Read photography books. There's not necessarily underwater ones. There's a lot of good stuff by a chap called Michael Freeman that are all about composition and things like that. And the other thing I would say is, practice, do some editing and do the editing bit of things, of organizing your pictures and keywording and things like that. That's the thing that often gets neglected because people get excited and just, do the post-processing side of editing where they make the pictures look different and things like that. But it's the organization stuff that saves you a lot of time when you haven't got the time, when you're on trips or when you're back stuck in work and coming home knackered. If you are on lockdown and have the time, get that stuff done now. But yeah, I mean, there's tons and tons of stuff you could be doing.
That's good. Now, obviously, England, we've now been allowed back to shore diving, just taking it easy, like shallow shore diving and everything. Hopefully, Scotland's obviously just relaxed up slightly, so that'll be coming in soon. I think Wales are announcing their changes today, so hopefully that won't be too long away. So what about diving in the UK for going and getting a bit of practice and everything in as well? Even if you're a dedicated warm water diver and everything, at least getting into the water in this country, even in an inland site when they eventually open, at least you can get in there and actually practice in the water.
Yeah, I dive in the UK anyway. And you chose me first. Duxy's probably for that. Funnily enough, my dry suit was put in to be repaired just before this all started, so I need to get my dry suit back. But yeah, certainly, the fact is, you can produce amazing pictures in a quarry. I've seen fantastic stuff, and the thing is, with that somewhat more controlled environment, the same reason why we sort of dive the same sites on workshops, it's the same kind of thing. If you can live near a site you can get to regularly, then you can go back and you can look and go, well, how can I get this picture different? And that's the sort of thing I say to people about how you become an underwater photographer, rather than someone who goes diving and just takes snaps and things, is you start going diving to get the photographs, and you go somewhere and you go, well, I know this site, I know the plane in Cape and Ray, I want to get this picture, and you start doing more and more wild, wacky things, some of which won't work, some of which will work. You could do slow shutter speed shots, get tripods and put your whole camera rig on a tripod, or you can position lights, off camera lighting and things like that. And yeah, being able, if you go into somewhere like Cape and Ray every other weekend, you can really get into it.
Yeah, no, that is the thing about UK diving. At least we've got this on our shores. You don't really want to miss out on that. So, Duxy, we need to get you
absolutely
waters again.
Well, I'll tell you something. At the Go Diving show, actually, I was chatting with Adam Hanlon, Wet Pixel, and he invited me and a whole bunch of us to visit. This is before, obviously, the lockdown, but I guess there's no excuse now. He said, I don't have to worry about a dry suit. I have a dry suit. Unfortunately, I am literally twice the man I was when I was fitted for that dry suit 20 years ago. So it definitely doesn't fit me anymore. But he said, that's not an excuse anymore. So Capers is not that far away from it for any of us. So I think we should sort of take Adam up on that and go and have a collective jolly at Capers. Maybe he's a thing. Maybe a few beers afterwards, perhaps. What do you say?
Yeah,
well, that's when it brings out all the proper creative juices.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. It's not open yet, though, Capers.
No, hopefully not long before the inland sites are coming. We could, we're going in the right direction. So hopefully not too long. And then we'll have to give the post-sturgeon advance warning that he needs his sunglasses because he's going to be getting obliterated by so many underwater photographers. Yeah. Talking of critters, what are your favourite subjects for underwater photography?
I keep coming back to the same thing as octopus. I absolutely love octopus. I don't think they're necessarily my favourite thing for subject matter. They're quite a challenge as subject matter because of framing them upright or horizontal, depending on where their arms are, and I just find them interesting creatures. All of the cephalopods. I find them sort of the closest thing to aliens on our planet. However, in terms of stuff to shoot, I mean, I'll never get tired of seeing a whale shark or a manta. That's always nice. But I'm equally as happy poking about in the muck looking for nudibranchs. So, it doesn't really matter as long as it fits what I've got going on in my head at that moment in time. So you could ask me that question loads of different times. You might get, loads of different answers. So it just depends, really.
Yeah. Cephalopods are probably my all-time favorite thing. From being like literally, I think the first night dive I ever did, the first week I started diving, went to Malta on a club trip, and met an octopus on there that literally climbed onto me. Young sort of common octopus, I think it was, literally climbed up onto me and sat there. So yeah, as a creature that isn't something people do manipulate them and move them around and things, but which I don't approve of. But as something in the underwater world that will interact with you, they're just fantastic, and a bit of a mystery, as that book I mentioned explains. But yeah, almost anything. The only thing I'm not a fan of is pygmy seahorses, and that's more because they're like my bête noire. I've never got a decent picture of a pygmy seahorse, and a lot of the time I've had them pointed out and not even been able to see them, which is just bizarre. I can find, I've found minuscule frogfish and things like that, but yeah, pygmy seahorses, kind of why I quite like long-nosed hawkfish, because they eat pygmy seahorses. So, but almost anything, big stuff, sharks, mantas, any kind of shark. I love a shark. I've never seen whales underwater. That's the only thing. I've seen dolphins, but I've never seen whales.
Yeah, no, I've never seen whales yet, unfortunately. Heard lots of them.
Yeah.
But, and even though they sound like they're next to you, I've never seen one yet. But and that brings me on to the next one. Most memorable diving experience.
Oh, I don't know. Oof. Most memorable. There's been quite a few that have really sort of been amazing, including that octopus encounter, which I've already mentioned. Probably one of the times where I sort of went, wow, this is a privilege to be here kind of thing, was not the first time I saw manta rays, but the time that I kind of encountered a lot of manta rays, which was in the Maldives, the first trip we'd ever done to the Maldives. And we're on a liveaboard, and we'd actually dived. I can't remember the name. It's a site in North Mali Atoll, so it's one that's not that far from the airport. Really, it's sort of up at the top, but it's not a big journey. It's a manta cleaning station, so they take you down and you basically wait for mantas to turn up at somewhere where they know there's a cleaning station, and if you're lucky, they turn up. And we saw a few on a couple of previous dives, and they thought, last dive of the trip, we'll take you back there. And there was the most mantas I've ever seen. The visibility is not fantastic, and you see sort of 7 or 8 around, but then you also see all the what they call it, the guys the guides sort of were good at spotting which ones were different, and worked out there was about 20 different mantas appeared. And we stayed down there. We were good on our air because we weren't moving around very much, and we had worn the right gear to keep us warm enough. And we were the last people to come up. Everybody else went, and we were the last people down there, and just me and Anne with these mantas coming right in over our heads. Amazing thing. I actually get almost misty-eyed thinking about it still.
Well, I guess mine goes back to quite early on in my sort of diving adventure, really. I mentioned earlier that I had a mentor, and a guy called Bob Johnson, and he, as a bit of a legend, he'd been out in Sharm since the sort of late 70s, in the sort of Israeli years, and the changeover to it being given back to Egypt. And I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time. He had like an open pass to the national park, and we would go camping overnight. And one night we went to Ras Mohammed, just on the beach, not far away from Shark and Yolanda Reef, which I'm sure a lot of you have dived before. And so we slept under the Jeep, under the stars. It was really, really nice. And then we went for an early morning dive. And if you're shore diving Rasmo, you've got to make sure that you get your entrances and your exits right. And so I was completely at sort of Bob's mercy, really. And he was much better on air than me. This stage he had thousands of dives. And so he took us off Shark Reef, and he decided that we were going to go off the wall, and we went off and off and off, and we were miles away from anywhere, and we encountered a huge school of barracuda, and there was about 5 or 6 shark that were hanging out in the school. And I was not doing so well on air, and I'd already signaled to him that I'd been down to half a tank, long before we even got out of this school. So I'm thinking, shit, what's going to happen? And the sharks are coming around, and these sharks were actually bumping us, because I think we were a threat to their food source, these barracuda. It was very exciting, very thrilling, scary at the same time. He turned to look at me, and he said, "Are you going like that?" "Yeah." And I think you know what that means. And I must have had eyes as big as saucers. I was absolutely on the edge of thrilled, terrified, all of those emotions, all at the same time. And then I realised I was running out of air. He just stuck his hockey in my gob, and then took us back to the reef. And then we went and sort of hung out on the beach for a while. So that was probably one of my most memorable experiences. Not something I'd particularly recommend to beginners, and that's how they should do things. But it's definitely up there in my all-time memories, no question.
Right, so that's your most memorable. Now, this is the one everyone always wants to hear about. What are your funniest diving experiences?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the problem with this is if you've ever been on, a workshop or with me, they're full of funny experiences. I mean, that's why we do them. I'm sure, to generate funny experiences with the crew and whatever. The things just seem to happen. However, and I've got to sort of try and filter out the ones that are suitable for a family audience here. But yeah, I mean, and I think, Phil, you know which ones I'm talking about. And people can PM me, and I'll tell them, oh, better still, come on a workshop with us all, and we'll tell you about that. Anyway, I guess being inflated in my new dry suit, I just got this beautiful O3 dry suit. And my colleagues thought it was hilarious. This was out in Egypt. My colleagues thought it hilarious to, as you do with a brand new dry suit, I inflated it to maximum, so I was like Michelin Man, and they flung me off the back of the boat and towed me behind the boat for what felt like a mile or two, but it was probably only a couple 100 meters, towing me as sort of a Michelin Man behind the boat, past lots of other boats with other more serious dive centres on board, all pointing and laughing at this goon in an inflated dry suit. So I guess that's a safe one that I can share.
There's lots and lots. There's a lot that I use to illustrate to people, things that I've done that don't do yourself. I did a dive in the Maldives where I got to, dive in a tiller, and tillers are these reefs that don't come to the surface, and a lot of them are sort of 15, 16 meters, maybe even deeper than that, to the top of it. Got down to the top of this thing, and there's a bit of current. It's not really feasible to go back to the boat. And I went to take my first picture, and I had a Canon compact camera. This is like quite a few years ago now. I pointed the camera at something interesting. I think it was a baby shark, so it was something really quite cool, and tried to press the shutter, and nothing happened. And I kind of, what's going on? Looked at the back of the camera, and it said Canon, but it said Canon upside down. I'd managed to get the camera in the housing completely upside down. And that's, we often teach, we always sort of mention, do test shots before you get in the water. And that's the kind of thing why. The other thing that we've got to tell you a tough story about me and Duxy. We often end up diving together, and we also dive. We've dived quite a few times. The four of us, me and Shelley, Duxy and Anne and Shelley, as a group. And Duxy and I got our love of cephalopods. We saw a blue-winged octopus and went towards it. And it rose. These things are tiny, they're not big creatures. And despite the reputation for being poisonous, only 2 people have ever died from being bitten by one. And we're in full, suits. And this thing rose up off the bottom and came towards us. And apparently we squealed like girls and finned backwards like the clappers.
I like it. That's fantastic. See, that's why everyone always wants to know the funny stories.
Yeah. Oh, we've got a lot.
Yeah.
I like it. Right. I think we've got some viewer questions now.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see what people are wanting to know from you. So here we are. Tony Neal, do you prefer wide angle or macro, and explain why?
Yeah,
I'll
have a go with this one.
Yeah.
Well, Goose. Hi to Goose. Goose is a legend. He's a legend on the trips as well. In fact, he was nearly going to be the funny story. Phil knows what I was going to funny story, but I thought no, it's not fair. It's not fair. It was very, very funny though. Anyway, wide angle or macro? Personally, I prefer wide angle. My brain works sort of more in a fisheye wide angle mode in terms of framing and composition and stuff like that. However, if I want some R&R from sort of thinking about pictures for articles and stuff like that, I'll definitely spend some time doing some macro. So I think it's a bit of both, but I'd say there's probably something like a 70-30 split there from me for wide angle. So that would be my answer.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I mean, I probably agree now with Duxy. I started off and I loved macro. I was into the marine life and I did a lot of macro. And to be honest, because I did that, I've got a much bigger reserve of macro pictures, and people do seem to like, you know, if you post on Instagram, a lot of it is about, they love pictures of nudibranchs and things like that. So it's a popular thing. But what I wanted to do after a few years of doing underwater photography, I looked at the wide angle and, you know, the close focus wide angle where people have something really bright and interesting in the foreground of the picture, and, you know, layers to the shot and things like that. And that was what I wanted to do and get better at. And I pushed myself, and I literally did 2 liverboards where I just shot wide angle and nothing else to get better. And now, yeah, a lot of the time I'll go, I'd probably say, 70% or so I shoot wide angle, unless there's something particular, or unless I'm, the same with Duxy. Because a lot of the stuff I shoot is for, it's like editorial stuff. It's for things on blogs. It's for things for talks and stuff, where it's like, oh, I've got to get a picture of, you know, a diver with a camera and things. So yeah, just same kind of thing, just to chill out. It's nice just to go, right, I'm going to look for little tiny critters. And I've done dives where I've been said to people, oh, we'll go and find you some little stuff. And I've gone in with a wide angle fisheye lens and things to take pictures of them. And it's like torture when everybody else is doing macro, and you're finding these amazing tiny things. I was finding literally minuscule mantis shrimps in the sand at Marsachagra, where we do the Red Sea photo camp, and I didn't have the right gear to take pictures of it.
Well, you should look for it.
Yeah,
them's the breaks, though, aren't they? I mean, that's partly one of those things. I think, you know, if you're in the water and you're taking pictures, you know, life's too short to be worried about whether you've got the wrong lens on or not. You know, it's not the end of the world. It's underwater photography. There's other things that are more, you know, important to worry about. But unfortunately, sometimes people stress, perhaps unduly, about which lens they've got on. Just enjoy what you've got.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then here we are. It was a nice question to round out from the viewers. Shane Molyneux, is video a better option for the Maldives then?
Yeah, I mean, it lends itself to that sort of more dynamic environment. However, I mean, what a lot of people, I shoot quite a lot of video myself, and I think what a lot of people forget about videography is you've still got to hold the thing still, you know? And so sometimes if you're in a strong current, that is not always easy. So you need to think about some techniques to learn how to dive in a current with a camera. I mean, it's very valid. A lot of people shy away from currents, you know, that are underwater photographers. But I think it's an important skill to add to your arsenal to learn how to take pictures in a current, learn what you can take and learn what you can't. So, I mean, yeah, definitely it's a good option for shooting in the Maldives. It's not the only option, though. I would say that don't limit yourself by saying, oh, well, because there's 2 strong currents, I can't take still pictures. I think you can do it all wherever you go. You've just got to develop your skill set so that you can switch, because all of these cameras now are great video cameras as well as still cameras. You've got to develop your skill set so you can switch between the 2. Easier said than done. You know, you've got to practice like anything.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
You agree with that, Phil?
Yeah. I mean, we've been to the Maldives quite a few times, and as I said, I love it as a place to dive. I think, there is sort of, it's one of those places, you know, you're gonna get very lucky if you get pictures of things like the sharks out there close up. And yeah, because of that, I think it does quite often lend itself to video. The other thing is you get these occasions where you see, you know, in the right place at the right time, you see a lot of sharks or a lot of mantas and things like that. And video often gives you that scope, that feeling of size and quantity that you don't get in individual pictures. Quite a lot of my favorite stuff, even though I've not been back to the Maldives for quite a while, a lot of my favorite sort of stuff is from the Maldives was video rather than stills that I got. And the trips we've been on, we had some fantastic the dive guides, one of them was really good at video, and she did some fantastic stuff. So yeah, it is a place where you can get good video, but also, like Duxy says, you know, if you you're doing a manta cleaning station, it's worth having a fisheye lens on and do stills, because one could come very, very close. It's difficult to say.
It's one of them things, isn't it? It's just with underwater photography, you just never know. So that's why it's always best to be prepared. So
absolutely. I mean, what Phil said there, it just sort of made me think of something. I think you were talking about David and Lisa, weren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I've been an ex-guide, of course. I'm going to say this: the dive guide is really important. Who you have, I mean, who we work with at the Red Sea photo camps, who I work with on the liverboards, they are fundamental to the success of the trip. Not just the dive guides, but the rest of the crew, the skipper. Because if they're not on board and they don't have your sort of vision for what you want out of the trip, it's not going to work. I mean, and I think that's something where sometimes workshop leaders can forget. I think it's definitely a team effort. There's no question about that. So the dive guides are really important. And bear in mind, the dive guide is at these dive sites day in, day out for years on end. They know the place better than you. So when they turn around to you and say, you know what, the current's going to be pretty pants, best not get in there, don't argue with them. Just do it. They know the place, you know. So yeah, I think it's a support thing, and I think it's a team effort, and I think that's definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Good advice to be ending on. And that's all we've got time for this afternoon. Thank you to you guys for coming on, Phil and Duxy. It's fantastic having you here. So thank you for joining us on the virtual sofa. Cheers.
Nice one, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Always, thanks. And a final shout out for MeFlex Hoses. As we said, their online store's open while we're still in lockdown to some extent. You know, if you want to sort out your kit, add some colour, get them sorted out now. Last thing to say really is, again, just if you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button and ring that bell. Our next one is on Tuesday, the 2nd of June at 8 o'clock BST. We're going to have David Diley and Brian Stanislas on, and they will be talking about how you can get into the filming side of diving and try and make a living out of it. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe.